and not that we want to make this video a primer on how to reform the Catholic Church or any religion,
No,
but
we don't.
we're hearing terms like, well, we don't have enough time for that. We're hearing terms like pew, fire and brimstone, confession, gospel, you know. So back to the contemporary scenario that we all find ourselves in. Another thing that seems to be happening is that leadership in general, geez, I don't know the best way to say this. If you go back in time, you know, we're in the 2000s now, of course, the teens actually, the 2000s, the 90s, the 80s, the 70s, 60s, 50s. People have said, Carrie, that that America started to become cynical. America, people from all over the world will be watching this video, people of all religions. But in the 1960s is the time that Americans in particular started to become cynical about world leadership. This was around the time of the assassinations of John F. Kennedy, Robert F. Kennedy, Martin Luther King. Shortly after that, the Nixon era with Watergate. Oh my gosh, now the president of the United States may or may not be lying to us. And now we find ourselves in an administration where etiquette and formality and civic discourse seems to be going by the wayside in favor of this rather blunt form of communication, which is kind of the opposite of spirituality. Spirituality is about taking care of each other and being kind, not because you have to, but because you want to, and because it's the standard. Is the standard changing in America about being nice to each other?
Well, I think in practice it has changed. Do I think the standard has changed? No. There's a couple tensions I hear in what we're talking about, right? I hear the tension of, for instance, authenticity. You know, I want someone who's authentic. I want someone that when they speak, I think they mean what they say and they say what they mean. And in politics, and many could say politics is a religion. I'm not one of them, but I think you could make that argument. That I want a politician who I feel like I can trust. Unfortunately, sometimes we equate honesty with callous, or we create honesty with a certain kind of directness, which isn't kind. And I think that there's a tendency in our culture to assume if someone says it, they mean it. You know, we look at kind of the reality TV culture we live in. But you and I both know that what we say, what people say on one stage isn't exactly how they feel on the inside. So I think there's a certain authenticity we're seeking, and I think politics really struggles with that. I think the idea of saying, yeah, I really want to help and change people's lives for the better, but how I do that is maybe different than what I've said, or how I do that is different than what people think. Yeah. I also do think, though, this question of leadership is something that both politics and religion struggles with, right? Because I need to be able to think that my leadership are people, men and women, who I can look up to, who are authentic, but who really truly do endorse the difficulties we face. So one of the things that the Catholic Church has really struggled with, right, is this leadership issue related to the sexual abuse crisis that has hit the country since 2002, right? But many religious traditions face this. If there's an ethics scandal, there's a business scandal, there's a money scandal, there's any kind of scandal, it's the men and women who readily admit to it, who endorse it, who try to change it, that I think fare better. And you do see that in the Catholic Church as well. Bishops who are willing to kind of speak truth, even when it's maybe personally not as gainful, comes out with more respect. So I think that there is a leadership issue here that faith struggles to discuss, because we don't like seeing failure in our leaders. We don't like seeing struggle in our leaders.
Or weakness.
Or weakness.
And maybe because politicians are attention merchants, just like anybody else trying to market something, that they feel that being more direct and being stronger equates to being a better leader, and maybe that's not correct. You are right on that we're talking here about a lot of things. We're talking about nuance, and we're talking about connotation and denotation. I think something we can all agree on is that we want to avoid the preponderance of three things: immorality, being unethical, and also being immoral. But
Yeah.
there have been so many things that have happened recently that, and of course, when you mention the Catholic Church and some of the scandals, a lot of them would qualify at least in two of those three categories if they were proven. But a lot of it has been this like this sense that maybe people are dodging or somehow dancing past the accusations, that they're not getting a full amount of transparency, which only causes more doubt about how we want to spend our Sunday mornings. And I think even feeds this idea that, well, instead of going to church, I'm going to start going to yoga.
Right. Yeah.
Right? Because yoga is about spirituality. Yoga takes about an hour. You got to put some money in a basket to get into the room, you know, and you're going to pay tribute to something bigger than yourself. It's kind of like church.
Well, I think people who engage in that are doing a couple things which I think are important, and that the Sunday, the kind of Sunday schedule really is about. It's about ritual. You know, it's about that I do something regularly and routinely. I can count on it, and it takes me to a place where I feel comfortable, with myself. And I think, this is kind of straddling lots of different divides, but many Catholics, back when Mass used to be in Latin, and many people didn't know Latin, would say there was something so relaxing and meditative about knowing the words, but not really focusing on the words because I can't figure them out anyway. But it took me to a very reflective pace. It was quiet. It was dependable. It was a ritual that I could engage. And that is, I think, something that I would encourage people of all faiths to find the rituals that nourish them, find the rituals that really give them a sense of meaning, and maybe an access point or a kind of tool that they can use to engage whatever is that faith, that powerful being, that God, that kind of connection with them. And I think that can be found in lots of ways, right? Is that ritual. But this idea that because I look under the surface, I look under the cloth, or I look, more deeply at something, I find that maybe it's just, what is it? The wizard behind the curtain, is just the man. The idea that if I explore too deep, I'll lose my faith. That's a joke, actually, by the way, in seminary. We will ask each other, now that you've studied theology, have you lost your faith? And the joke behind it, of course, is that if you know a lot, you begin to see humanity all throughout the faith journey and all throughout the religious story. And the idea, I think, is that once you do see the wizard behind the cloth, do you still have the power to get what you want out of this life in a meaningful way? And Wizard of Oz is any story, Dorothy does. I think we all do, right? And I think it's about not being afraid of taking that journey.